Well, hello, David. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. I want to just first introduce you for folks who might not know your amazing body of work. I got to know you at the Goodman Theater, where I was the director of new play development for many years. And your last project there was We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time, which you wrote and performed in and was directed by Robert Falls there in the fall of 2018, and went on to a production at the Public Theater in summer of 2019,
Yeah.
and just won an Outer Critics Circle Award for Best Solo Performance, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And some of your other work includes Harry Clark, which was done off Broadway, starring Billy Crudup, and won a number of awards and is recorded by Audible. And then a lot of solo work that was featured at the Goodman over the years, including Lillian, Somebody Else's House, Deep and Dream of You, Smooch Music, and the Red Throats. And I know you've also collaborated with artists like Debbie Harry and Elvis Costello, and of course Dale Orlander-Smith,
Yes.
who's a frequent collaborator and known to Chicago audiences. So the reason I want to talk to you today is, Pivot's really excited that you're going to be part of this project called Untouched: Artists in Quarantine, which was inspired by the idea of thinking about, what are we as artists and as just people missing in this time where we have to be 6 feet apart from one another, and we're often separated from our family and friends. And obviously one of the things we thought about was the kind of hunger for touch in all its many forms. But Julianne and I, who were thinking about this project, immediately thought of you, both because we are both super fans and think you're a genius, but also because, when I think about your work, so much of it I feel like is kind of about people who are hungry for something, who have, something has been taken from them, or they need something, and they find really creative ways of filling that hunger, either through connection with nature and animals, or through art, through performance, through finding beauty. And so I felt like you were sort of the perfect person to tackle this kind of subject. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about your work sort of generally. And one of the things that I've been struck by, because we're Facebook friends, so I get to see all your photos on Facebook. And one of the things that is both kind of central in We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time, but then also, seems to be a kind of ongoing passion for you, is animals.
Yeah.
In We're Only Alive, there's birds, which feature pretty prominently in the piece. And you seem to be having a love affair with squirrels lately. So I'm just curious what it is about animals that you feel like attracts you to them, and maybe it's specific animals that attract you to them, and what you get from that connection.
As a child, I bred birds, so I was always around a lot of birds, and then occasionally animals. But there's something about, I don't know what it is, but animals, generally speaking, are less afraid of me than I would have thought. For example, this whole thing. Well, actually, the piece that I've written for the festival is about. It starts off with this sort of interaction with this squirrel. And this is, it's a very autobiographical piece that I've written. And this is the first time I met this squirrel, but the squirrel came up to me. And now I see the squirrel every day. The squirrel is literally running up my leg. Well, this happened yesterday. But this squirrel is completely like a pet. It's a wild animal, but it follows me around the park. It's peculiar. I don't know what it is with me. And it's always been this way with animals and birds.
Well, the other sort of thread that I was thinking about through your work is the idea of performance, as a way of kind of hiding, but also as a way of presenting who you are, or finding who you are. For example, in Harry Clark, it's all about someone who's essentially impersonating someone else, but in some ways discovers that is as much who he is as his original self.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of your works, there's that sense of, putting on a performance or putting on an identity. Is that is that a conscious sort of thing that you are interested in exploring, or is it something that you've sort of found through the?
It's something I write very intuitively and very instinctively, and I don't really know where I'm going till I get there with a lot of the scripts. But with Harry Clarke, I was interested in the idea of somebody taking on another persona, and that persona sort of liberates their truer self more than their day-to-day way of living. So it's but it seems to be something I keep doing. I've got another new show called Sandra, and there's somebody in one of the main characters is pretending to be somebody who's not. It seems to be a running theme. But
do you think that's part of what you're drawn to as a performer? Because a lot of your work as a solo artist is, sometimes autobiographical, but also taking on the roles of many other people and many other voices. Yeah,
it's I'm not sure. I mean, the thing I think, especially the early shows, was the latest show, the latest show that's been produced, We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time, is totally autobiographical. Mm-hmm. But the earlier shows, I think my life was so out of control as a young teenager that I think the first shows on some level were I could control the world. In a way, by being the only person on stage and playing everybody, sort of thing. And I could also figure out sort of fairly complicated situations, in a sense, by playing everybody. And not that it was therapy, but there was something about creating my own little world on stage that I was in somewhat control of, as opposed to my childhood life where I was pulled around by forces that were much stronger than me, or events that were very sort of traumatic. But it's curious. But it's my work is so intuitive, and it just hit me recently that I've been writing these solo shows for now since the early 80s, and I have all these shows, and it's what I do. I mean, I basically do write solo shows, and it's such a peculiar living to be like a monologuist, but it seems to be. It also snuck up on me, and still sort of catches me by surprise that I have this quirky occupation. I mean, I act in other people's things, and I write for other people, so it's not solely solo, but it is a curious track that I've found myself on, or I've created for myself.
Totally. Well, and the other thing that's really lovely about your work and somewhat unique is the way that you blend song and text, and that you write songs, you sing, and some of your pieces are really, I mean, we talked about this with We're Only Alive, is it a musical? Is it a solo piece? There's so much music. Again, I suspect it's probably intuitive, but are there times when you think about, well, does this belong? Should this be crafted as a song in this moment, or does this want it be a piece of text? Is that something? Is there any way that you make those decisions, or is it just intuitive?
No, I mean, with We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time, I thought the story is so. I didn't want it to be a slog, and I thought right from the get-go, I thought everybody has to sing. And also recently, I'm now going to contradict myself, but I've had this sort of rule that all the shows that I was performing have songs in them. Although this other new show, well, I'm not going to perform Sandra, but it's that doesn't have songs. But I love what music does to things, and and I started off as a singer and subsequently a songwriter, so it's sort of what I come from. I saw We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time as a musical. I mean, I know a lot of people didn't, that it was a play with, I mean, it's this whole thing, what is a play with songs?
Music, yeah.
Music. It's an ongoing thing. I mean, it's, but I mean, the way I proceeded with it was as if it was a musical. And even in Harry Clark, there's a couple of songs. So Billy Crudup sings in Harry Clark.
Yeah, I never got to see it.
It's
but I heard it was fantastic.
He was incredible. Well, we're hoping to do it again, but it's the opening night of it moved from the Vineyard Theatre to Minetta Lane Theatre. The opening night of that Minetta Lane Theatre was the best performance of a solo show I've ever seen. It was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable tour de force. And he sings.
It's strange seeing someone else perform your work in that context. I mean, because it's so often it's you embodying those words.
Yeah, I mean the thing was with Billy, because I didn't want to perform Harry Clark because I thought if I do, because I knew that you were bringing We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time into the Goodman, the New Stages Festival, and I thought if I do Harry Clark, which would seem, coming out of my mouth, would seem pretty autobiographical potentially. And I thought it's really going to muddy the water. And it's like, well, which is the truth? I didn't want that kind of confusion. So, and also, Audible produced Harry Clark with the Vineyard Theatre, and they didn't want me. I mean, they wanted somebody better known. So, which was fine with me. I mean, but the thing with, I don't really care how well-known somebody is. I mean, it's exciting to work with well-known people who are also really fantastic. But I want the right person. I don't want just to put a well-known person into a script because they're well-known. I mean, everybody wanted Billy. It was unanimous. I mean, there was no discussion. And then, so it was a real, and it is, I mean, it's ongoing, a real kind of artistic love fest. And it's been wonderful for everybody. But I'd never sat in an audience and watched anybody else perform one of my shows.
Oh, wow.
So that was, and it's also because Billy Crudup is so beloved as an actor, and he's such a fantastic human being as well. But he's really beloved. And I thought, if this doesn't work, that's going to end my fragile career. I mean, if I tank Billy, but it didn't, it wasn't. But there was a day when I was like, it was like a high wire act. I was like, oh my God, there is no net. But sitting in the audience and watching him, I mean, he's magnificent in it, but hearing the audience respond very, I mean, the people didn't know who I was for the most part in the audience, so I was hearing a real response, but just it was very encouraging and confidence building to me as a writer to feel that, oh, this is really working.
Well, tell me, you mentioned that in terms of what you've been up to in quarantine, you mentioned you've been, frolicking with the squirrels. But what has been, I'm curious to hear, like, if there have been things that you have found during this time that you sort of hope to maintain, if and when we come back to some sort of normalcy, whether it's inspiration or process or whatever.
Well, the thing is that on some level, I'm used to being in my apartment all the time because I write in the apartment. And because I don't perform that often, I'm more writing more these days than I'm performing, which could change. It sort of ebbs and flows. But right now, I'm in the apartment a lot. So it's not, that aspect of it is not new to me. The thing about it, I find it was immediately difficult to concentrate on anything. Well, it's such a such a kind of harrowing time.
Right.
But I thought I have to keep writing. It's also because my shows, certainly for the last 20 years, they're very rarely commissioned. They usually, like, I write them and then I find a home for them. So if I don't write, and that was the whole thing with Harry Clark particularly, it was a very big lesson to me, because it was hard to get anything produced for I don't know, there was a few years where I just couldn't find a home for my shows. But I kept writing. And then the Vineyard Theatre wrote to me on a Sunday at the end of June, asking if I had any solo scripts that could go into production in the fall. And I sent them 3 that hadn't been produced. And if I hadn't been writing, and Harry Clark jumped into production, it was in production like a week and a half later.
Wow.
If I hadn't been writing, there would be nothing to send. So that kind of hovers over the proceedings now. In that, I mean, you got to keep going, because when we all get back to something more normal, I want to have things that I could potentially do.
Right.
And that won't just happen unless I sit down and write. So I've got to somehow, as distracting and as distressing as the current situation is, I've got to somehow barrel through it and keep working, or I'll stop. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll just ground to a halt. I mean, I've had this news list. I've got actually 2 new shows, but I won't totally grind to a halt. But you know, it's so much of this is endurance, in terms of any kind of long-term career. And if you don't work, it doesn't happen. So it's and you know, it gets harder as you get older. There's both in the world wanting you, and also it's easy to get kind of lazier, and I can't have that happen. Totally. So
that's inspiring, David. Thank you for that. I also the last question I wanted to ask you is just about, you know, obviously Pivot Arts is a Chicago-based arts organization, and you have a long history in Chicago. I mean, you're obviously a New York-based artist and have a lot of relationships there and have done work all over the country. But you built a lot of work in Chicago and have a long history there. Is there anything particular that either draws you to Chicago or that you feel is unique about the Chicago scene, the Chicago audiences, that's different from your experience in New York?
I mean, I love Chicago. I love being in Chicago. But the thing, I feel a rapport with the people in the audience in Chicago. I felt from day one. And it's not, I can do the same show in a city or town where you would think this is really going to click, and it doesn't. So it's a very delicate thing. But it's also because the Goodman, I mean, when I started working at the Goodman was in 87, and Rock Schulfer said to me from the Goodman that we want this to be a home for you. And he meant it. I mean, it was such a statement that could be made in good faith, but it's hard to keep.
Right.
And you know, 7 shows later, it's been, I mean, the Goodman has been undoubtedly the backbone of my artistic life. And it's also, I don't think I could have survived this long without the Goodman. Because aside from the fact that they were producing my shows, just psychologically, knowing that I had this major American theater like believing in me, and also just to be able to say to people, I mean, just it meant so much wherever I went in terms of the theaters that I had this relation with the Goodman. It just kept me psychologically going, and it kept me going, just generally speaking, in terms of the productions, and three of the shows were commissioned. And I don't know if has anybody else ever commissioned a show from me, a whole evening. I don't think they have. They haven't. No, that's it. The Goodman's the only organization that has ever commissioned a whole show.
David, I'm so excited to see the piece that you created. I'm really looking forward to it.
I was trying to learn it this morning.
Okay.
Not easy. It's getting off book. Even I wrote it. I mean, and it's very autobiographical. I should be able to just riff my way through it. Not that I don't do that, but I mean, I do stick to the script. But it's learning lines. That's the only thing that is noticeably more difficult getting older, is learning the lines. I never got them right with We're Only Alive for a Short Amount of Time. All through the Chicago production, all through the public theater production in New York, I was getting literally this poor girl in New York, like 4 pages of line notes. The last performance too. I had them through the entire run. I could not get that script. And it's very precisely written.
It is, yeah.
And it's like, can you please get it right? I'd correct something, then I'd make a new mistake the next night, and then correct that. Then the thing that I corrected would get uncorrected. It was like, oh
God.
Anyway,
well, is there anything that you want to tell me that I didn't ask you?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, nothing off the top of my head.
Great. Well, as I said, I'm excited to see it, and I'm grateful that you participated in this project. And
I'm very happy you asked me.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a pleasure. And I've been enjoying following your love affair with Squirrely McLean. And
my little red squirrel friend. It's too much. I've got to draw the line.
Well, thank you, David. Take care.
Oh, you're welcome. You're so welcome. You too. Thank you.
Bye.